Well, the first question really is, I'd like to speak about you first, really, and find out, how did you get into this kind of field? What was it that sparked the zeal and the love to actually do this kind of work?
So I think from a young age, I'd grown up with my parents, but I'd grown up with my dad, who when I was a young age, he attempted multiple times to take his own life. I didn't really understand as to why, and thankfully he wasn't successful.
Yeah.
He was later diagnosed with manic depression, which is now known as bipolar. And he had huge waves and up and down, and I saw his battles and his struggles, and he used alcohol a lot of the time to mask kind of the symptoms, and he always would be outwardly happy, always be the joker at of any sort of social event, but inside he had some demons, and he battled with huge amounts of childhood trauma, and as I got older and through my teens, I actually saw more and more of his struggles and battles. And also back then, we're talking sort of 30 years ago plus, there wasn't much support and there wasn't enough known, and I wanted to make a change because I didn't want anybody else to go through the same thing as a young person, seeing their very broken father and begging and pleading them to make a change, but didn't know how to do it. So for me, that prompted my journey into mental health.
Oh, wow. So it's from a personal point of view.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely
For sure. And I can honestly say that my dad was so very proud when I told him what I wanted to do. I never said it was because of him, but I think he also knew, because there was a lot I was subjected to, and he probably wasn't really aware of how much he subjected me to at the time. So for me, it's just trying, one person, just reaching out to one person and helping them with their struggles. If that's all I can do, hopefully it's more, but...
So at the very beginning, you said that, your dad was like the life of the party. He was a very sociable person.
Yeah.
Was that him masking? What was...
Oh, for sure. And this is where a lot of the time people see suicides and things come at a huge shock, because they're like, well, he seemed okay or she seemed okay. But actually, there is very much this mask. It is literally, you go outside your front door in your safe box, as it were, and you put on a mask and you pretend to be a different person. And you can be outwardly happy and joking and jovial, but actually inside, these demons are crippling you. And the negativity and the noise in your head can be so, just to a point where when you're back in your box, you feel alone and isolated, even though you've got around you lots of people that love and care about you. But those moments can be truly horrific.
And is this something that is more prevalent in men? Is this something that both men and women do equally?
I think it's more prevalent in men.
Right.
I'm not saying that it doesn't happen with ladies, but I think that men, there is still that old adage where you've got to man up, you just got to get on with it. You've got to be seen to be this strong, kind of robust kind of man, and you have to, bit like Teflon coated, everything's just got to fall off of you. Well, do you know it doesn't? And I think that actually the realisation that actually men worry about exactly the same things as women do, but women tend to talk about it a bit more, and it's more acceptable for a woman to say that she's feeling a little bit low or sad or down or having a rubbish day. But if a man says it, then it's like, what's wrong with you? Well, actually, no, we're all equal. So actually, where's the difference? As times are changing, I can see the stigma is less, but there is still a huge gap where men just feel like they can't talk about it, and they will be judged upon themselves for talking about mental health and any sort of battles that they might be having.
Is that the problem? The fact that men are not communicating, they're not being...
I do believe so. And I think that the pressure that men put upon themselves, to be the provider, to be the, the alpha male, that dominant person in the household that has to kind of hold everybody together, that is such a huge pressure in itself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women would be honest and say, well, actually, I don't want my husband or my partner or to be like that. I just want them to be. So I think, you know, social media has an impact. You know, you talk about your feelings and then you're a snowflake. You know, there's this such a negative thing.
Yeah.
And I think now we have social media. So men openly talk about their mental health. Like Tyson Fury, the boxer, he's openly spoken about his poor mental health. Now, I've seen so many negative comments on social media about him talking about that and really putting his character into disdain. But actually, you wouldn't say it to his face, probably.
Definitely not, no.
But
definitely not.
again, this is what I mean. Then you've got the faceless people that are saying all this negativity as well, and that doesn't help. And I think that has a massive impact.
Even, you know, on my own journey where I've been doing my own channel on YouTube, the comments that have come out can really mentally affect you. And it's funny, I might get 10 really positive comments, but one comment will be really nasty. And that's what, you know, gets to rent space in my brain for a while, which can be quite frustrating. What advice would you give to people who maybe getting negative feelings or, you know, having negative thoughts? What sort of advice would you give for someone to be able to get out of the hole that they may have put themselves in?
I think the thing is talking is the key, and saying to somebody that you are struggling and being open and honest. And if you don't feel you can have that conversation with your family or your friends, then reaching out to, you know, various support groups that are out there, and having a confidential conversation and just trying to start the dialect. Because as soon as I always see suicidal thoughts as being governed by basically a demon inside. And while you keep it silent about your demon will grow and grow. But as soon as you sort of voice out about that demon inside, it starts to shrink because you're not empowering it anymore. Winston Churchill famously used to talk about his mental health and refer to it as his black dog. And would talk about the black dog would be sat with him some days right up front, and sometimes it was at the back in the distance. Very similar scenario, but I do believe that if you talk about it, it will disperse. It's not going to solve every problem, but I do believe that any issue there is a solution. It's just finding the right solution. And there are so many good organisations that will help and support.
Are there sort of organisations that you would recommend or that you've had dealings with?
So Andy's Man Club is a big one for me. They are a peer-to-peer support group. They look after men's mental health. And there's no judgments from the moment that you walk in. I believe also that Shout is a really good organisation. It's a text service. So again, if you don't feel like you want to talk, but you just want to text and have somebody text you back and just talk it through faceless. Also, there's Calm, which is another really good organisation. They're very good. Samaritans is another one. That's one of the ones. But again, I've had far more dealings with Andy's Man Club. And there is a huge amount of support for guys to go. And if there's ladies, then definitely Shout and Calm.
With all the, as you said, the attitude towards mental health has changed. And we are now in the Awareness Week. There's lots of activities being put forwards now with lots of things that we can do. In your time as a practitioner, what have you noticed in terms of the attitude? Maybe, you know, companies, people, what sort of attitudes have you seen in the terms of their way of being able to interpret it, you know, mental health? Is it now something that's on the radar and recognised and understood, or is it still something that is a work in progress?
I think for a lot of companies at the moment, it's a work in progress. I think a lot of companies will employ mental health first aiders or train their team members as mental health first aiders, but I believe that it's a tick box exercise, because if you've got somebody that's only had a 3-day training course, yes, they can have a conversation, but do you want to have a chat with your colleague that maybe you work alongside with about what's going on? Sometimes it's really difficult to then look them in the eye again when you've kind of bared your soul.
Yeah, I understand that.
So again, it's controversial for me, the mental health first aiders, because then you've got a person that could be listening to somebody else's sort of issues, and then you don't know what they've had happen in their past. So that could traumatise them.
I always feel like someone in that role needs to be neutral,
For sure.
and not someone who is connected to you in your workspace. Because, as you said, if I say to you, "Oh, I'm having problems at home. I'm not getting on with, maybe not getting on with my wife, or my kids are driving me mad, or I'm having dark thoughts," and you say it to a colleague, if that colleague is your manager and in a year's time you're going to have a review and they say, "Oh yeah, no, when we talked about that," it could be a bit of a conflict of interest, and it could be quite uncomfortable to do that.
I think in all fairness, you should be able to have those conversations with anybody, especially your manager, but there is always that fear. And that if you're then pipped against somebody else, for a promotion, would you then not get that promotion because of what you've then alluded to?
Yeah.
I'd like to say that manager would be open to both of you on the same merit. But again, it depends on what that manager's precursor is for mental health and how. Again, I just feel that sometimes that people have their own predisposed sort of view of mental health.
Yeah.
I think companies could always do a lot more. I think when it comes to people going off for sort of under mental health, as it were, I do think a return to work that's solid and sound, and also phasing somebody back in and making sure that they're supported is key into that. It's great to have the conversations, but it's about the support when they come back as well, and continuing to do that for sort of at least 3 months, because it can be a bit of a roller coaster.
Could be ups and downs.
Yeah, and also when you're coming back into a work environment and you've been out of the business, it can take some time to kind of feel that memento again. And then with work pressure adding on, your stress cup, as it were, could be then overflowing again, and then you could find yourself off work again. So it is that sort of keeping in check and maintaining that support.
I think in my own experience, if I've been unwell physically, whilst you're off work with the physical side of it, the mental side of it is also being affected now. How are they seeing me? How, am I sick? No. Am I going to be able to go back to work and assume my position what I'm doing? Will I be trusted? And those are sort of things that can actually build up a momentum. And then when you come to work, if it could be the wrong thing said and it could trigger it. Or you may be fortunate to work with a good team and they're like, "Get on, crack on, you've got work to do," along those lines. So I'd like to talk now a little bit about, because obviously we've mentioned quite a serious subject like suicide. The media tends to show suicide as a young person's, it's usually young people that we see. Whenever they think about people that are ending their life, it's young people. But actually, can you tell us a little bit more about the reality of actually the figures of people that are actually, committing suicide? What's actually going on there?
The statistic is now that it's the biggest killer in men under the age of 54. And you are finding more and more that the demographic is actually sort of 40 to 50-year-olds are the ones that are at higher risk.
Yeah. Do we know why that is?
I again put it down to that generational. So you look at how gentlemen of that age have been raised. So suck it up, get on with it.
Stiff upper lip.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But also then, worrying about money, job, family. You've probably at that age, you've still got a mortgage. You're still trying to maintain a family. You're still trying very hard to make ends meet with every other day pressures. And I think more and more these guys are not talking about things. They're bottling everything up. And because of how they've been raised, I'm not saying that it's wrong in a sense of how they've been raised, but I think now things are different and we've learned a lot more. We've learned a lot about childhood trauma and things. So therefore, and the impact that has on your adulthood life. So if unresolved trauma happens, I think then it can come to fruition sort of in your sort of 30s and 40s and 50s. So I think that my concern is always with that age, because again, a younger person has been brought up a little bit more to talk about things.
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen, don't
No.
get me wrong. There is still, sadly, far too many young people taking their own lives. But I think that, yeah, definitely, sort of the 40 to 50-year-olds do worry me.
So when we mentioned that, you know, we're good at masking if we, you know, we may have thoughts of, you know, dark thoughts, but we're pretending to be happy and smiling. But are there any sort of telltale signs that something might not be right? Is it that you should be looking out for?
I think if you've got somebody that continually keeps cancelling social meetups or whatever, makes excuses or what, and that's out of character for them, I'd be concerned, because again, people can go into their little box and want to stay there, and they make all the plans in the world, and then last minute they cancel them because they can't deal with the social aspect of things, because it can be quite exhausting. Also, somebody may be then starting to drink quite excessively or partake of drugs, or even starting to engage in risky behaviours that maybe you think, well, that's really out of character. There are sadly people that do mask very, very well, and you don't actually know until it's too late. But I think also it's having that, just asking the question, you know, to keep checking in with people. You know, if you haven't heard from your mate for a few days, and usually you've had a few texts throughout, check in with them, see if they're okay. Don't be afraid to ask, and ask twice, because sometimes the first answer is I'm fine, the second one is actually it's a bit of a rubbish day, or it has been a rubbish day, or I'm really struggling at the moment. You never know if on the second time you might get a different reply.
You might get a proper answer. Recently I saw an advert on the telly about mental health, where two gentlemen are watching a football match, and one gentleman is really talkative. He's talking all the time, and the other person's sort of really down, really pensive, and you're drawn to assume that this is the one
I've seen this one.
And then at the last scene is the quiet one is actually the one that sits down, and the one that's talking is not there. And it really sort of drives home the thought that it could be anybody. They could be hiding thoughts, you know, there could be things going on in their world that we just don't know about. So it's important, it's really good to talk. If someone is in a situation where they may have lost somebody, what advice would you give in terms of dealing with sadness, bereavement, that kind of thing? What sort of advice would you give to try and encourage people to move forwards and move on?
I think allowing yourself time is the key thing, and not rushing your grief. Grief is such a personal thing, and you can have, you know, a group of people all grieving for the same person, but everybody will grieve differently. So it's allowing your feelings to come out, talking about how you're feeling, and if you're feeling sad about them going, and you're going to feel numb at times as well, and you will find that you are, you know, you're struggling with the day-to-day for a while probably, but again, there's no set way somebody grieves, but it's just being open and honest about that you are struggling. Again, it's about talking, and it's about, you know, talking about it, talking about the person, talking about the good times and the bad times of that person. You know, sometimes people find it helpful to write things down, to write their feelings down, a little bit like a journal or something. But even just, you know, sharing that with somebody else can be really cathartic. There's really good organisations like Cruise, which is a dedicated bereavement charity. They're good at supporting anybody that's lost loved ones through various ways, and they're a dedicated phone service and face-to-face service for the supporting through counselling, if you are really struggling with it. And then there's also SOBS, which is Survivors of Bereavement Through Suicide, which is a charity dedicated to supporting people that have lost their loved ones through suicide. But I think the thing is as well, it's just allowing yourself to grieve and knowing that it will get better in time. And it doesn't mean that you don't love or miss them any less. It just gets a little bit easier. And just understanding that it is a journey that you have to go on, and it will just take time.
If someone comes to you and speaks to you about how they're feeling and what's going on in their life and this, that and the other, and another person comes and speaks to you and talks to you about what's going on in their life, and another, how do you process that? Because it's hard enough dealing with your own business, to take on other people's. How do you separate yourself from that to be able to function?
I think in terms of the separation, I think I would say that I don't have separation,
Right.
in a sense of, because I actually find that the role I'm doing and the role I've done for many years, you do become invested in everybody.
Yeah.
But I find,
what I mean is the coping mechanism for yourself.
I have my time. I have my downtime.
So you talk. So in the sense that someone talks to you and would say, this is what's going on in my life and this, that and the other. And I feel like it's like a cup and you're filling it up with lots of information that may not necessarily be affecting you. But how do you keep yourself completely separate to be able to then say, right, take care now, see you later. I now need to get on with my own life. What mechanism do you do to keep yourself so you don't end up pouring a bit of the cup into your own world?
I think you do. Right. And I think it would be remiss of me to say I don't.
Right.
I think I do, because if I've been around people that have attempted suicide. I've been on a phone call while somebody was trying to attempt to take their life, and on the other two phones, one phone in the ambulance and the police, the other phone in this person, and we're talking it through, and I'm shouting at them because I'm getting frustrated. That stayed with me for quite a long time afterwards. Thankfully, that individual didn't take their life, and a couple of weeks afterwards, they actually rang me to say thank you.
That's fantastic.
Called me a potty mouth because it did get to the point where I did swear at them.
Oh, right.
But again, you're in the moment. I'm sorry, but you can't speak eloquently when you're actually wanting somebody to stop what they're doing. And I think I definitely probably was invested in that person staying alive. So and that has stayed with me. I think you get to a point where if you're in this type of role and you're helping people, a little bit you'll always take with you for the good and the bad. And for me, it's about realising that that's okay, and you just find my coping mechanisms are spending time with my children, going out for walks with my dog, going and watching silly films at the cinema, and just having family time. That's my downtime. That's key for me. So I find that's really, really helpful. I know that a lot of other sort of counsellors, therapists, practitioners will find their own coping strategies. But that is, for me, so very important to keep myself kind of on an even keel. Because, there are times where it is a lot and it is hard. And you sit back and think, that was a really tough day. But it's also the recognition that it was a tough day, and that's okay. And that can be put into general practice with anybody.
I was thinking that, as you were saying, I was thinking family time, being active, you have hobbies. These are the sort of things that maybe someone may not have. You might be a workaholic, or you might.
And it's so important to just find something, even if it is just reading of an evening. I have found since COVID, I quite often will spend 5 minutes of an evening before I go to bed just to decompress. I'll go on TikTok and I'll watch everybody else's stuff and probably have a giggle. But for me, that really does sort of zone me out, so I can go to sleep well. And it's a thing that I've done since COVID. And my husband laughs at me and he's like, "Oh, you're on that bloody TikTok again." But for me, that's my coping strategy. And that's how I just zone out. It's not the greatest because I'm doing screen time before bed, and I could get into the whole ways and why for, but that's my thing.
That's your
and it's
that's your
about somebody
escapism.
finding something. You know, it could be cooking, it could be reading, it could be walking, it could be standing in front of the TV and doing some yoga from online. It could be dancing like no one's watching and putting the music on really loud and just having a moment. It could be, you know, many things. But you have to find, I could list a whole list of things you could do, but it's about finding something that you love, you enjoy, just to get you through. And it's also remembering today has been a bad day, but tomorrow we reset and we start again. And you start with a clean slate tomorrow.
Is that one of the bits of advice you give in terms of goal setting?
Oh, for sure.
Really?
You don't, there's no point looking back. You know, it's if it was a rubbish day today, if you're continually looking back, you're not seeing forward, you're not seeing the new things that could be in front of you. So keep looking forward and driving forward, because otherwise it's a negative exercise.
Right.
Reflection is good. But looking back is unhealthy. That's my personal belief anyway.
So that's part of the encouragement, that part of the healing process is to know that the cut is there, but it's healing, and let's move
and don't
on.
keep picking at it.
And don't pick it. I suppose that's a very difficult thing to do if it's a traumatic experience someone's going through.
And trauma is something trauma is dealt with very differently.
Right. Okay.
And trauma is something that needs to be unpicked delicately, sensitively, and slowly. So again, I would always say if somebody feels that they have got trauma, that they need to seek professional help with that. And they can go to a GP, they can ring the 111 service, and actually ask to be referred to sort of like talking therapies. Because you would need somebody that specialises in trauma to unpick that, definitely.
Yeah, so that's obviously it could go back to their childhood, or it could be a very, very specific thing that's happened in their life. And their life pivoted. You know, and I suppose that's probably more common. It could be, you know, they lose someone and the life they thought they were going to have, or they get a divorce, or some of these things can be quite very traumatic, you know, especially if you go through it.
They can be, and I think the thing is as well is we all go through certain journeys in our life, and it's how we cope with them. Now, everybody has various different foundations on how they deal with it, and the foundations are how you were raised as a child. And that will set in stone on how then you deal things with in your adulthood. So you could have two people have exactly the same sort of journeys, but it's how they were raised, what foundations, what coping strategies, what they were taught by their parents. So that's another thing. I think it's important to start educating our children early in order to understand mental health and be able to talk about their mental health quite freely.
So as a child you would bring that to their attention?
I have an 8-year-old son. He has autism. He's partially sighted, and there are days where he finds things quite overwhelming, and he'll ask sometimes if he can have he calls it a stress day, but it means usually a day at home just trying to focus on him and him having some time out from the world, as it were, and usually it will be him drawing or trying to deal with the emotions that he's feeling inside in sort of a positive way.
That works.
Definitely, because if he doesn't have that, then he has a burnout, and then he's just wiped out completely. That could be him in bed for 3 days because his body just shuts down, and he will just literally hide under his covers, for days and days on end. So for me, it's educating my children to understand mental health, to make them kind of, again, more robust young, I've got boys, so robust young men, and in hope that my education will help them, and then when they have children, they can educate their children. I think it's really important.
A fantastic conversation. I really do appreciate the time that you've had. Is there any concluding words that you'd like to give, just to, you know, in terms of what support you'd like to say out to anyone? What kind of things would you like to end the conversation on?
I think realistically that if you're watching this and you are dealing with suicidal thoughts or negative emotions at the moment, that you know, we recognise and understand it, but I think that know that you're not alone, and there are multiple organisations out there which Johnny will post on there, and there is somebody out there that is willing to listen, and somebody that's will care. I think your GP is a great point of call. I know that they get busy, but it's important to try. You've got your local walk-in centres. You can ring the 111 service as well. But I think that understand that there are people out there that do love and care about you and want to help and support you on your journey. And it is a journey, and you're going to have good days and bad days, but it's important to remember that actually this will get better, and this is, you know, this is just a period of time at the moment. It's not going to be like this forever.
Thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate the words that you said here today. And it's the counsel and basically the tips, I think, are really important, and it'd be really good. I hope that even if one person watches this video and hears something that, you know, they can appreciate and implement into their own lives, and it helps them, then this video has been, you know, has been a success. Thank you very much for watching. I really do hope that you've enjoyed the video. If you like it, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I really hope to be able to interview more people about subjects that are really important to us in our living, in our day-to-day lives. So thanks for watching and take care.